For the longest time, the luxury sports sedan has been the choice for enthusiasts looking to get out of their sports car into something that has a back seat, a little bit more luxury and tech on the inside. Now, for the longest time, a BMW 3 Series has long been the choice for a lot of enthusiasts. However, last year, Genesis really shocked the market with this model here, the 2019 G70. Now, for 2020, the vehicle stays pretty much the same, but this is the fully loaded G70 3.3T Sport trim. It has all the bells and whistles on it, and it still is one attractive looking sports sedan. The biggest thing about this thing is it offers 365 horsepower, and it significantly undercuts its competition by several thousands of dollars. Now, on my left, we have an all-new entry for 2020. This is the Cadillac CT5-V. Now, of course, unlike the CTS-V, this is not quite as fire-breathing as its previous generations. You also have a turbocharged V6, about 360 horsepower, and Cadillac has reduced the price of this thing significantly. This one is roughly the same price as the Genesis, but you also get a much bigger car on the inside. So if you want the back seat space, this is the one you're going to want to choose. Now, obviously, between these two sports sedans, they're both really good looking. They're both incredibly fast. They both offer all-wheel drive. But which one is actually the better buy? That's what we're here to find out. Now, looks are always going to be subjective, so obviously my opinion may differ slightly from yours, but between the two front faces of these vehicles, I actually think the Cadillac is the better looking car. Now, of course, Cadillac probably didn't push the envelope too much with the design, but I just love the combination that my tester has. This evergreen metallic with the black accents, the V-specific grille, the full LED headlights with this very nice signature LED running light with the LED turn signals, LED low and high beams. And I also like just the way the actual shape is of the car. I like how much bigger and wider the CT5 is versus the G70. Now, of course, the G70 is not a bad looking car. In fact, Genesis is about to refresh this thing significantly for 2021. So take a look at this front end, but just know that this is the old front fascia. You have the Genesis specific grille. I don't like how the radar sensor is kind of right in the middle, and it's very noticeable on this car. But you also get full LED headlights. The LED daytime running lights aren't quite as distinctive as the Cadillac. You have LED turn signals down here. Both of these cars don't offer any fog lights, but you can really tell how much narrower and smaller the G70 is. So in my mind, I think the CT5 is the better looking car at the front. Now, between these two sedans, the Genesis G70 is technically the entry-level offering, while Cadillac has one sedan that's below the CT5. And from the side profile, you can really see the differences here because the CT5 is obviously a much larger vehicle. In fact, at 194 inches long, the Cadillac is about 10 inches longer than the G70, and its wheelbase at 116 inches long is about 5 inches longer overall. So clearly, this car is designed to compete more with the G80 on the exterior, although the new G80 is about 3 inches longer than this versus the G70, but they're both priced the same, and Cadillac likes to say that this is a 3 Series competitor, which is also the same thing as the G70. Now, both of these models are the sports-specific versions. So, of course, on the Cadillac, we've got a 19-inch wheel here. It's riding on 245 tires on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. You also get Brembo 4-piston brakes here, which look great, and you can also paint those calipers red or blue if you'd like for an extra $600. Now, in contrast, the Genesis also has a 19-inch wheel, but you've got a smaller 225 width tire in the front, although it is a staggered 255 in the back, which is 10 millimeters wider than the Cadillac. The Genesis also comes with Brembo brakes with red calipers. This is also included with the sport trim. Personally, I think the wheels, for me, I like the wheels of the G70 more. I like the dark gray finish, but let me know in the comments below which one of these sedans looks better. I'm probably gonna say I like the proportions of the Cadillac more because it's bigger, but I still don't like that C-pillar trim over there. It kind of reminds me of a Chevrolet Cruze. Now, from the rear of these two sports sedans, I'm gonna have to give it to the Cadillac because I like how Cadillac is using a full LED design to the taillights. The vertical stack here kind of mimics the front headlights of this thing, but you have basically a full LED taillight, LED turn signals. I like the quad outlet exhaust, although that is just an exhaust trim piece. And then, of course, Cadillac went a little bit more subtle back here with the badges. In previous years. You have a small little all-wheel drive badge, a V badge, and then you have this tasteful little rear lip spoiler. Now, in contrast, the G70 also looks pretty good, but I'm gonna have to ding Genesis because they didn't give us LEDs for the turn signals and for the reverse lights. It's just an LED brake light, so that's definitely making it look a little bit cheaper. Down here you have a more traditional look to the oval exhaust tips. It's just, again, a trim piece to it. You have this rear diffuser, which looks pretty much almost as aggressive as the Cadillacs, and overall I think this is a really clean design. Remember, this design language is going out because there's a refreshed one coming for 2021. Now, in terms of the trunk size, the Cadillac Doesn't offer a power opening or closing trunk, but it does pretty much open on its own because it's hydraulically assisted. This has 11.8 cubic feet of space with seats that fold down 60/40, so it's a pretty good sized trunk. In contrast, the Genesis has a power opening trunk, which I wasn't expecting to find in this price class. It's not available on the Cadillac. Now, Genesis does have a slightly larger opening to me, and it measures around just over 10 cubic feet, so it's about a cubic feet smaller. The seats also fold down in a 60/40 manner. Now on the inside, let me first start with the G70 because this is the smaller car, and honestly, this interior when it came out last year was really nice. This had, you know, the diamond quilting, the real aluminum trim. It looks very modern, and I especially like the sport trim with all the red stitching. Now first getting inside and shutting the door, it has a relatively solid sounding thunk, which I remembered it last time I was in this car. It adds to that impression of quality. I like the location of the start-stop button. It's also very easy to find. And when the thing starts up, you know, it has the typical noise that you expect from this 3.3 liter twin turbo V6. Clicking it over to sport mode. It doesn't sound like much on the outside or on the inside, which we'll talk about later on in the driving scene. Now, Genesis is getting ready to update this interior because if you guys watched my video of the G80 and GV80, it's got a completely new interior with a 14.5-inch tablet screen. You can see the one in this car is very small. It's half the size. This is only 7 inches. This looks pretty much the same as the last, or any Hyundai and Kia product that you'll find. So this is kind of where you see a little bit of cost cutting here. It does include Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, of course, which is nice. It doesn't include wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but remember, this is the older system, but it still works relatively well. It has factory GPS. It's easy to use, it's snappy, it's responsive. And in terms of the materials here, you can see there's some red stitching and leather stitching all over the dashboard here. There's real metal trim. The door panels are soft touch with more aluminum trim. I have 2-person memory seats, and the seats also adjust in 14 different ways. And I also like how Genesis gives you the ability to move the front passenger seat forward and back and recline it from right here, which is really nice if you guys are trying to move this seat up to give backseat passengers more room. Now over here on the center console, you can see there's heated and cooled seats, which is nice. You have a 2-level heated steering wheel, dual zone climate control, a lot of hard buttons here and knobs. So this is all very easy to use and understand. You have a wireless phone charger here, a USB port over there, an aux port, a 12 volt, and then this controls the 8-speed automatic, which you can see includes a 360 camera on this particular trim, which has decent resolution. The screen again is a little bit small. This is probably what I would say average. It's going to start looking dated in a couple of years, which is why Genesis is going to be replacing the system very soon. Down here, you can see there's a few more buttons for your stability control system. You can change out the drive mode selector from this knob over here, and you have some more metal trim. Now, overall, I think the cabin is still nice in the G70, but it does feel a little bit snug. The sunroof on this model here does let in a good amount of light, but it's kind of like just a normal size sunroof, maybe a little bit larger. But in comparison, let me hop into the Cadillac. We can compare the interior of that all-new model. So after just hopping out of the G70 and into the CT5, you can immediately feel just how much more spacious the inside of this car is, which doesn't surprise me. This is a significantly bigger car on the outside. Now, getting inside and shutting the door, it has a relatively solid sounding thunk. I honestly don't know which one sounds better. They both sound pretty good. Starting the car up, the Cadillac puts the button back here, which is hidden by the steering wheel, so it's a little bit easier to find in the G70. But starting the car up, you can hear the V6 has a slightly louder rumble in this car. And it definitely sounds better on the inside as well as on the outside versus the G70. So Genesis, you need to work on the sound for that particular model there. Now, looking at this interior, you can see it's an all-new interior design, and Cadillac has been working hard to completely re-engineer their interiors, especially making them a lot more user-friendly. Now, obviously, the screen here is front and center. This is a much larger screen versus the Genesis. It measures 10 inches diagonally. Cadillac says it's one of the largest screens in the segment. It's also a tablet-style touchscreen, and you can immediately see the CarPlay looks a lot better here because of that larger screen. If I go pull up the Waze, for example, it takes up the entire screen, really great resolution. Pushing the home button here, you can see this is the Cadillac latest infotainment system. It's very snappy, responsive, it's easy to use. It also includes embedded GPS. So this is an improvement, although I would say that Cadillac could have pushed the envelope on this a little bit more versus, you know, some of its competitors. Now, in terms of the materials, I'd say this is about even with the Genesis. You have leather stitching with red accent stitching throughout the cabin. I do like the carbon fiber look trim and the metal speaker covers that you get with the Bose sound system, which, by the way, I believe the sound system in this car sounds a little bit better versus the one in the G70. The Bose Performance Series ones just sound pretty good. This has a total of 14 speakers. There's also a lot of hard buttons in this car, which Cadillac kind of went away with those touch-sensitive panels on the CTS. They also replaced a lot of those fingerprint crazy piano black plastic with this sparkly black plastic, which doesn't actually show fingerprint marks, so that's a very huge improvement. The door panel is also soft touch materials. You have aluminum accents, more red stitching. The steering wheel in this car, I actually think the steering wheel in this car feels better than the G70 because it's a fatter rim, which I really like. You also have magnesium metal paddle shifters, which are better than the plastic ones you find in the G70. When you put the car into reverse, you can see this one here is missing the 360 camera, which sucks because it's more expensive already. But the resolution, I'd say, looks a little bit better than the Genesis because you have a bigger screen. And if you guys go for that parking tech package, you get the full top-down 360, which looks nice. This also has an electronic shifter for the 10-speed auto, and Cadillac gives you a volume knob here, a volume knob there, a tuning knob there, and tuning buttons, and like another controller here. So if you want to use a touchscreen or you can use the controller, that gives you that option. There's also a wireless phone charger here, a nice big center console area over here with 2 USB ports, a USB-C as well. And then my tester is missing a panoramic sunroof that's like another $2,000 extra, which would brighten up this cabin. But I will say that the seats, these are 14-way adjustable seats. They're heated and cooled on the Cadillac. I think the seats are a little bit more plush in this car, but I'd say that the seats in the Genesis hug you a little bit more, so it's gonna come down to your preference. Now, if you guys regularly need to carry adults back in the back seat, the G70 is not going to be the best choice because this is where I had the front seat to drive, and as you can see, there's about 34 inches of legroom back here, but it feels a lot less than that. I'm not very tall at all, and my feet are basically, they feel like they're trapped underneath the driver's seat. There's a little bit of foot space here, but this is just really, really tight. So even the Kia Stinger and most of the competitors offer more space versus the G70, so you're kind of sacrificing that. You do have at least rear seat air vents. You have 1 USB charging port back here. You have 3-level heated back seats back here, and the materials are also soft touch. And then folding this down, Genesis does give you an armrest here with some cup holders, and I also really like the stitching back here. So it's a nice looking interior still, but the back seat is pretty tight. So obviously, if you guys need to have more room in the back seat, you're gonna wanna choose the Cadillac because, I mean, just look at this. Comparison to the Genesis, this offers 38 inches of legroom back here, so about 3 to 4 more inches of legroom. And I also don't feel claustrophobic. My legs aren't slammed underneath the seats. This is where I have the front seat to drive. I'm 5'7". And while there is a big hump right here for the center passenger, really, I'm just impressed. I can kick back here, cross my legs, and get very comfortable in this car. So this is a much better back seat. Now, in terms of features, you have rear seat air vents, 1 USB-C, a power outlet here, 2 map pockets, but unlike the Genesis, this car has an armrest, cup holders, but no heated back seats, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. Now, when you look at these 2 sports sedans on the outside, they may look like completely different vehicles, but when you look underneath the hood, they're actually quite similar because let's start with the G70. This is the top engine. It's a 3.3-liter twin turbocharged V6 with their gasoline direct injection. It makes 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. It either is rear drive or all-wheel drive like my tester. Power flows out through an 8-speed automatic transmission. Premium gas is required, of course. It's rated to get 17 in the city, 25 on the highway. Genesis says you'll get to 60 around 4.5 seconds, and this one weighs around 3,800 pounds. Now, of course, in relation to the Genesis, the Cadillac is a significantly bigger car on the outside, but you actually have a smaller engine here. This is a 3-liter twin turbocharged V6, but it makes 360 horsepower, so 5 less than the Genesis, but the smaller engine actually has more torque. This has 405 pound-feet, which tells me that the turbos have slightly more boost on this particular car. Now, unlike the Genesis, this has a 10-speed automatic transmission, so 2 more gears, and Cadillac offers a choice of either rear or all-wheel drive, like my tester. And the surprising thing about this thing is it gets the same gas mileage as that car, 1725 on premium, of course, and for being a bigger vehicle, this car only weighs about 100 pounds more. As this one sits, it weighs around 3,900 pounds. Now, these are luxury sports sedans with twin-turbo V6s, so let's fire up the Genesis and see how this one sounds. So the G70 has a pretty typical noise that you expect from a V6. Doesn't really sound too loud, but let me fire up the Cadillac and you guys can compare the noise of the CT5-V. say, I'm gonna have to give it to the Cadillac. This has a deeper growl to it versus the Genesis, which had sounded a little more tinny. Yep, the Cadillac sounds better.
Actually got a little bit of a burble.
Yeah, there was a burble. I was like, oh, okay. So these are sports sedans. So to kick off the driving scene, I'm first starting off in the Genesis G70. Now, when I drove this car almost 2 years ago, if you can believe it, I was blown away with just how impressive this new car was. It still is right now. I mean, remember, this is the Kia Stinger platform, which is also built off of a modified previous generation G80 platform. And while I haven't driven the new G80, the G70, this one here, is still one of the best driving sports sedans that money can buy today, regardless of price. I mean, the G70 still has the really strong value quotient on its side. It's still a very good looking car, and even though Genesis is getting ready to completely refresh this car, there's still something to like about this one here, especially when you're getting behind the wheel. Now, of course, this one is the 3.3T, the twin turbo V6 with all-wheel drive. It's a rear drive biased all-wheel drive system. And it's also got the sport package, which also includes the prestige package. It's a freaking good looking car. The wheels are probably my favorite looking wheels that you can find on the segment. And just like I remembered, it has amazing feel to it. The steering is just really talkative. It's really direct. It just gives you a ton of feedback on what the front tires are doing. The visibility in this thing is also really good. You have a really good view out of the front, good view out of the back, the sides. You have the Genesis full driver assistance safety tech, which is standard, which is not something what I can say about the Cadillac. The Cadillac forces you to pay extra for things like adaptive cruise control, which is just an insult considering the price. And even though I have it in sport mode right now, the G70 still rides extremely well. It's very comfortable, it's very compliant, yet it also feels firm and insanely well built. So this is a car that still impresses me. If you like the way the Stinger drives, you're gonna love the way the G70 drives, because it feels just like the Stinger, but just smaller and more nimble. And even though this car weighs around 3,900 pounds, Genesis has magically found a way to kind of hide the weight and the fat in this car when you start pushing this thing on some corners. Now, if there's one disappointment about the G70, it probably is going to lie within the sound. This 3.3T, despite it having a sound enhancer, doesn't really sound like much when you put your foot down. And that's not to say that it's a bad sound, it's just a very muted sound. I wanted a little bit more noise, I wanted some crackles and pops and backfires from the exhaust. I mean, this is the same company that gave us the Veloster N with that rowdy exhaust noise that made all those, gun firing noises out of the back. And I really was hoping to find some of that fire in this car, which unfortunately it's just not there. This is supposed to be more of like a luxury sports sedan. But we're gonna try the launch control. This one does have all-wheel drive, like I said, so you just have to turn off all the nannies, put it in sport mode, floor the brake and the accelerator. Ooh. It actually had a little bit of wheel spin there, which kind of surprised me. This is all-wheel drive, remember, but it's kind of cool that this thing had some wheel spin. So 0 to 60 comes in at 4.5 seconds. It feels every bit as quick as this. This is pretty much in line with like a Tesla Model 3 dual motor, the non-performance. It's a little slower than what you're gonna find in an Audi S4 or a BMW M340i or C43. Those are in the lower 4-second ranges. But considering the price of this car, it, for me, is perfectly fine. I think this thing has plenty of power, it has plenty of handling. It's such a good driving car that it really sets the bar high. This feels more sporty to drive at times than the current BMW 3 Series, and that itself is already a really, really sporty car to drive. You turn off the nannies in this thing and seriously, it's an all-wheel drive car that will spin the back end out. It lets the tail fling out. It's so easy to control. You just kind of do a little counter steer and the thing just slides, rotates back. It's comical, and that's exactly why I love this car so much. It reminds you constantly this is a rear drive car. It's better to drive than all the Japanese competitors, and it feels like it's right in lockstep with all of its German entries at a significant price discount. Now, of course, Cadillac's always kind of had that claim as well with their sports sedans, so let me finally hop into the CT5 and let's compare it after just getting out of the G70. All right, so now moving into the Cadillac CT5, you can instantly tell this car is a longer car, but mostly I just feel a lot of extra interior space, which is definitely nice to have. Now, this car does come with launch control, so let's go ahead and try what it feels like. Ooh. That was nice. Immediately I noticed the CT5 feels a little quicker, which is a really wonderful thing. This car has more torque than the G70, but a little bit less horsepower, 5 less horsepower, but you gotta hear those shifts. This 10-speed transmission really makes a nice like upshift, like burble noise whenever it shifts, and it only does it in kind of the performance mode. It even has a built-in 0 to 60 timer, and it got 4.8 seconds there with launch control. Remember, this car is all-wheel drive, which is definitely nice. It also offers like several different modes here where you can go into a sport handling mode and whatnot. This is where you access the launch control. It's still annoyingly difficult to kind of actually put it into the performance traction management. You have to go into track mode and you have to like double tap the stability control off button, you know, in sequence, in the perfect sequence, otherwise it doesn't do it. I miraculously got it to work on my first try for this video, which is frustrating because sometimes I just couldn't get it to work. But regardless, the CT5 for me feels just as sporty as the G70. It sounds better though than the G70. It has a much crisper sounding exhaust on the inside and on the outside. This also has the sound amplification. The 10-speed in this car, floor it from a stop, is a pretty responsive transmission. It also comes with these magnesium paddle shifters, which are a little bit nicer than the G70s. But I just love the burbles and the crackles this thing gives you on that upshift. It's just a really satisfying noise, and I wish the G70 did that as well. Unfortunately, it does not. Oh, listen to that noise this thing makes. Wow, what a noise. I love that noise. But I do notice the G70 is slightly more tail happy. I had it in stability control off mode. It's in its performance traction management. I was expecting the rear end to step out a little bit more. Remember, this one's all-wheel drive, but rear drive is going to be the standard, you know, and it also is an all-wheel drive, a rear drive biased all-wheel drive system. So I am noticing that the Cadillac doesn't feel quite as driftable as the G70, which is kind of what I expected because this is a Cadillac. It's supposed to be a luxury sedan as well. However, I do wish that this had a little bit more tail happiness to it. Like, you can tell that the CT5, they've toned it down a lot for this new generation, you could say. But you know, some of you are probably questioning, how can you compare a CT5 to a G70? This is supposed to be compared to a G80 because it's almost as big as that, whereas the CT4 will compete with that. Now, keep in mind the CT4 doesn't offer the same kind of power. It doesn't offer a 6-cylinder like the CT5 does, and at 58 grand, but 47 to start, this is right in line with the price of the G70, but I will say that Cadillac is lacking in terms of standard equipment and value. Like my Tester, for example, is missing a pano sunroof. I don't have adaptive cruise control, but what I do have is the 4th generation of GM's Magno rheological dampers, and this thing rides amazingly. I love the ride quality in this car. It actually rides smoother than the G70, and you have a bigger back seat, you have slightly more interior room, so you get more car in this thing for a little bit more money. And that's kind of where the CT5 feels very tempting for some people, because, you know, it's nice to get a bigger car and, you know, you get more space, you get a little bit more torque. It does make this thing a little bit more, you know, pleasing to some enthusiasts for sure. Let's try the launch control one more time just because we can. Wow. Okay, so I got 4.7 seconds there, which is off the time that GM quotes. They say 4.6 for this thing, which is actually a little slower than the G70. But I will say this car feels a little bit more potent because of the additional torque. You can feel it falls on its face a little bit, you know, once you go into higher RPMs. But you know, this is going to be plenty of power for most. Remember, V has been repurposed to not necessarily mean that this is like a Audi RS competitor, BMW M competitor. This is more like an M340i competitor, and of course a C43 and an Audi S4 competitor. Now, even there, in full race mode with all the nannies turned off, it still doesn't step out as much as the G70, which really surprised me. It's still a lot of fun. The steering in this car actually feels a little bit more direct and precise than the G70. It's a little quicker and it's a little bit heavier, and it provides more feedback. So Cadillac, of course, still gets that right with the sport chassis tuning and this Alpha platform, which is just really good. I mean, if you've never driven a Cadillac sports sedan, this ain't your granddaddy's Caddy for sure. This is such a joy to drive. It could easily handle more horsepower, so I'm super excited to try out the upcoming Blackwing version of this car. Now, about 2 years ago, when I first drove the Genesis G70, I proclaimed it to be one of the best driving sports sedans for its time. And 2 years later, Genesis obviously has a refreshed one coming, but this is still one excellent driving sports sedan that offers a strong value. And really, even though this car is about to get a complete redo, I'm still very impressed with the G70, especially with the 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6. It definitely feels like the faster between these two, and it also feels slightly more sporty, although I'd argue that the Cadillac is a little bit more refined and easier to drive on a daily basis. Really, it just gets me excited to see what Genesis is going to do to this car, because this one here, at a price of $53,000 fully loaded, represents a very strong value. Because if you're going to compare it to something like an Audi S4 or BMW M340i, it's saving you roughly $15,000 compared to those competitors, which really makes the Genesis a strong entry. And when you factor in the strong warranty, the Genesis concierge service, this is a car that really should be selling a lot better than its numbers would suggest. Now, that brings me, of course, to the Cadillac CT5. I was expecting to not like this car when I first saw it on paper, because I didn't like how Cadillac has diluted the V series for this new generation. But really, when you start looking at the CT5 as a whole, Cadillac really did a really great job with this car. It still rides on that excellent Alpha platform. So even though this is 10 inches longer than the G70, it doesn't feel that much bigger when you're out on the road, but what it really gives you is way more refinement. You have a better ride quality, you have way more space on the interior, you have better tech in this car for now until Genesis refreshes that car. And I also really like the styling of this car, just the overall package that you get. And when you also factor in the price, Cadillac dropped the price of this significantly. Now, of course, this one here stickers for $58,000, about $5,000 more than that G70, but I would argue that this is probably worth the $5,000 just for the bigger space on the interior and the more impressive tech. But I will give points back to Genesis, because for that money, you get a bigger sunroof, you get full driver assistance. While this car, you're missing a panoramic sunroof and you're missing the full driver assistance, and you're going to pay around $63,000 to get those features, which would make this car about $10,000 more than the G70. So if you can live without those features at $58,000, personally, I would choose the Cadillac CT5 as the winner, because I think that it's the better all-around package. But of course, I'm gonna have to wait until Genesis refreshes that car to redo this comparison test. But for now, between these two, my pick is gonna go to the Cadillac CT5-V. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this comparison test between the two newest sports sedans on the segment, the Cadillac CT5 and of course the Genesis G70. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.